We shall begin with Dato' Paul.
Okay, I think you have heard what it's all about. So we prepared to take questions from you. Any questions? If we can answer, whatever. Clarification, question.
First on the UNCAC report, since it's come up last year and there are a couple of recommendations and obligations to implement. One is the independence of the MACC. Could you just elaborate on what's the when's that going?
Actually, the report can be quite technical, so I have not gone through completely in detail. But I do know that two key recommendations, of which the government is now putting in place. One of it is to make the MACC to be a separate service commission, where they can have their own terms and conditions of employment, and where they can employ people, also not necessarily from the civil service. Any experts or any person with specialized knowledge dealing with corruption, they can employ. And second one is to enhance the position of the Chief Commissioner to be similar to a judge or to AG, where he or she cannot be removed except by a appointed tribunal. No? So this is to make sure that the position of the Chief Commissioner is safeguarded. And as you know, we have announced that we will be preparing for this, but it requires the amendment to the Constitution of Malaysia.
Do you foresee any problem with this, or is it just a matter of
I'm not sure. As you know, to get a two-thirds majority requires to go across political divide. Correctly, there shouldn't be any problem, because I think this is for the good of the country and good for the MACC. But I'm not sure. But this one I will leave it to the Prime Minister, other members of Prime Minister, my colleagues to follow it through. If I may, maybe Tan Sri, you're more familiar.
Yeah. With regard to this matter, number one, we would like to the public, Malaysian citizen, to understand MACC is independent. We want to make MACC an independent body that truly free from any form of pressure whatsoever. There's no such thing. Since SSPRM was formed in 2009, now it's high time for us now. And I'm for the chairman of the Suruhanjaya KAS and pencegahan rasuah ataupun the Parliament, whereby our committee consists of 7 members and comes from all parties, from our political party in the Parliament. The opposition, all opposition parties are represented. So it's a question of collective responsibility. The point is that now, what we are going to embark, what we're going to do is something good for the country, for the public, and everybody. To ensure that, I think because we don't have a two-thirds majority in Parliament today, so because of this position, the intention is very noble, very good, and it's not the position I've been harping on, talking about corruption. Here we are going to go to the root of the whole cause. So in order to ensure to get a two-thirds majority, we have representatives from the political parties. They are with me. And then I would like to inform you that in principle, our Honourable Prime Minister is agreeable to it on condition, on a very important condition, at no time that we can put up a bill and later not being supported. We cannot afford that. So here it's up to the political parties of this country to come up and show to the world that we are here truly independent, we have our mind. If something is good for the country, why not? Forget about our political divide. That's what our minister said just now. This is very important. I think this is, we have made our recommendation to the Prime Minister. I think every member representing the opposition party personally have told me, validated to me that they are supportive in it. And in particular, I can quote as an example Yang Muhammad Datuk Taqiyuddin, a member from Parliament of Kota Baru from the Islamic Party, Party PAS. He has openly, frankly told us he will stick to his principle. If his party doesn't want him, he is prepared to resign. That form of commitment which I really look forward. Same thing with me. I do have the same spirit, same commitment and conviction. We want to do something, we want to be involved, everything, what is important, national interest. So I really reiterate and I fully support what our minister said just now. I think this is a very good opportunity for the general public to understand. But since we don't have a two-thirds majority in Parliament today, we welcome. We want to ensure, we want to see all members of Parliament. They are honorable people. They are representing the public. And this is something good for the public. Why not? That's all. Thank you.
But Tan Sri, how far does the MACC's political will extend?
Well, I can see that, as you know, the Chief Commissioner, Abu Qasim, is not only appreciated by Malaysia, he's now the international recognition given by the anti-corruption body of the world. And I've been going around the world also representing the country. I was in Mexico about 2 weeks ago, and then we talked about it in the Asia Pacific Parliamentary Forum. Well, as what our minister said just now, Malaysia now being watched, being looked something that is good to our country. So if the foreigners, the international body, the global citizen can appreciate, why not our own people? So we need the support of the people, because democratic system, parliamentary democracy depends on parliament representative. So parliamentary representative must represent the people. So if people want something, forget about your personal interest. You have got to, because every 5 years, the public has given the right, the power is given to the public to choose the government. So once we have one, I would like to reiterate what the minister said. Respect the rule of law. The rule of law is made by the legislators, by the members, the representatives, the lower house and the upper house. Once it becomes a law, everyone must obey and follow the rule of law. That is something which I really look forward. So once the law is made, everybody, nobody is responsible, nobody is above the law, but follow the law. So if MPs, senators can be like that, I think we are home. Our country is something that is for the good of our country. Forget about all negative part of it.
Dr. Paul, regarding the changes in the law, will the government be moving a bill, tabling a bill to actually introduce outlawing living beyond your means, meaning MACC can actually investigate someone who is living beyond their means?
Oh, that is Section 36. That is under being looked at by the AG department.
So will it not be on yet?
It may be a second phase.
Second phase, on this round.
Maybe, yeah. But most important is to get this. There are several amendments that we want to put in to strengthen. If I can just, this is the most important. The other one is the corporate liability law, which is to make corporation liable for bribes, practices for bribery paid by their employees. They are only proven innocent provided they have a proper, reasonable system of anti-bribery system in place in the company. Because fighting corruption is not just the public sector, it includes the private sector. So that's another piece of legislation that we like to see put in there.
How about prosecution powers for MACC?
I don't think that is in the books. I think prosecution powers is to be the AG chambers. Yeah.
Is that something that the UN review has brought up or raised, or is that something that internally
No, not necessarily. Yeah.
Perhaps Mr. Sherwin can elaborate on that.
Can you the prosecution powers?
The convention, going back both to the question that was asked about the independence of the commission as well as the last question, the convention just requires that every country that joins this convention has body or bodies which are in charge of law enforcement issues related to anti-corruption, as well as body or bodies which are in charge of prevention of corruption in countries. It also requires that these body or bodies, which can be multiple kind of entities at the national level, enjoy independence from undue influence and be provided with adequate resources to do their job. It doesn't prescribe what form these entities should take. It cannot do that because countries have very different environments, very different legal traditions, very different kind of institutional setups and so on. What's essential is to make sure that these independent bodies exist. So as long as there is an independent body which is in charge of investigation, as well as it could be another body which is in charge of prosecution, that requirement is fulfilled. So it doesn't necessarily require that all of these powers be concentrated in the same institution. And in fact, I think the reviewers were kind of highlighted some of the institutions which are involved in this work in Malaysia, including the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. They were just suggesting that this issue of dismissal or replacement, which is not addressed in the law, could pose a risk, a risk that could be addressed. And we understand that this process is being undertaken, and hopefully that can be addressed. But it could be different entities that are in charge of law enforcement, and very often countries have several entities which are in charge of law enforcement in the area of anti-corruption.
So all these amendments will be appearing in the coming session? Or the second one later this year?
Perhaps the corporate liability may appear earlier because that's just amendment to MACC Act. The constitution one probably will appear in the later part of the year.
So anything on political financing?
No, nothing on political financing at the moment because they need to look at it carefully. Yeah.
Section 36 is the same as the Constitution, or
No, it's the MACC Act.
I mean, would it be tabled the same as the Constitution change, or later on still?
Later, yeah.
I have a question for Mr. Sherwin. Compared to other countries who took a long time, how did Malaysia manage to complete the review in 1 year?
In general, the way that countries handle this, we don't get into too much detail of the process because that's a confidential kind of part of the process. But nonetheless, I have to say Malaysia was quite fast in fulfilling the requirements of this review. And I understood from talking to my colleagues in the Secretariat who were involved, this was in great part due to the preparation that took place before the official process began. I mean, that we consider a good practice, and we encourage other countries to follow the same model of starting their preparation well in advance so that they can actually complete the process in a timely fashion.
So Sherwin, could you explain to us a little bit about the weaknesses that was identified, and what do you think are the areas that Malaysia can strengthen?
Generally, I wouldn't be talking about my own opinion on this. This is actually the report that was prepared by reviewers, the experts from 2 other countries which looked at the anti-corruption efforts and the implementation of the convention in the convention. Bear in mind that this didn't cover all areas of anti-corruption work. It was focused on half almost of the convention on law enforcement and criminalization and international cooperation. So some issues will be looked at later. But as I said in my earlier remarks, a few kind of areas where the laws could be refined further, there could be more clarity in the law, or sometimes where the scope of the corruption offenses could be broadened. So one example is the question that was earlier asked on illicit enrichment. It's addressed, I understand, in the current law, but the scope of that could be broadened. Right now, apparently, they look at illicit enrichment only if there is an investigation ongoing. This issue will be also looked at, but the kind of one recommendation was that this be broadened to also be able to start investigations related to illicit enrichment, which was the question that was posed earlier. Same, also another number of areas which are all actually addressed in the Malaysian law, as far as I understand, but they could still be refined or a bit broadened, including trading in influence is another example, which is kind of included, but it could be a bit broader notion to include people who use real or supposed influence to basically engage in acts of corruption. Obstruction of justice is also addressed, but the recommendation was that elements related to obstruction of justice be consolidated in a consolidated offense. Apparently these are now dispersed through some different laws, but also that this obstruction of justice can be used as a predicate offense for money laundering kind of cases. So there were a number of different elements like this. As we talked in a bit more extent about the issue of replacement or dismissal of the chief commissioner was one that was referred to. Some areas, including on confiscation of transformed or converted property from proceeds of corruption, when it's converted into another form of property, that it could also be subject to confiscation. Apparently, that could be still clarified in the Malaysian law. The same goes for forfeiture or confiscation of instrumentalities, the properties which are used as instruments for use in corruption offenses, that they could be also subject to confiscation and forfeiture. In the area of international cooperation, I didn't go through all the different elements. There are a number of others similar kind of fine-tuning. There was also in the area of international cooperation some suggestions to improve some of the practices related to international cooperation. Having said that, I think overall it was observed that the International Affairs Division of the Attorney General's Chambers and other institutions engage very proactively in international cooperation, which is seen as a positive kind of element in the work with other countries.
So these 23 good practices makes Malaysia number one.
That is not something that we look at that way, because one element which is very important in this whole review process is that the governments, the member states of UN and the state parties to the convention decided that this review process should not include any ranking. So unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, either way you can see it, we don't use this review as a means of ranking countries, because it's also a bit perhaps unfair or difficult to compare different countries with each other. It's a bit of comparing apples and oranges. So, so we don't use the review process as a means of ranking. You can, of course, get your own conclusions. I have to say, yes, there is a considerable number of good practices which were presented in the report, but we do not compare it with the other country reports.